Hey, welcome back, beautiful people. My name is Brian. Welcome to my channel. If this is the first time you've seen it, this is the first official video other than the channel trailer. I am Brian. I also go by Mojo or Corn, but it doesn't matter to me what you guys really refer to me as. I am a high school teacher, educator, who decided to make this YouTube channel to kind of open up some insights and offer some points or my view of the teaching profession, and hopefully open up discourse that will allow others in and outside the teaching profession a space to communicate about some of these issues and problems that I'm going to start addressing on today's video. So today's video is going to be a start to a three-part series addressing the problems of education that I see personally within the education profession. And then there'll be a second three-part series that'll address the solutions that I think that we could make as a society, both at a micro level and a macro, like governmental level, to fix some of these issues that I'll address in these first three videos. So as you see, I've kind of laid them all out here on this Google spreadsheet. And then today, first, we will be tackling the one that I have highlighted there, which I think is the biggest one, or the most common one, at least, that you hear for teachers, is the not being paid enough. Now, I think that every person in society doesn't think they get paid enough. Even the wealthiest individuals. And so I'm going to specifically tailor this to why teachers are unique in the reason for not being paid enough. And statistically, there's evidence for this. But I'm also going to add an additional layer that I don't just think that we're not paid enough. I don't think we're paid equal to the responsibilities that society has tasked us with. That we are burdened with a lot more than just simply teaching, and what that actually means in the practical sense. And so we're going to go through those as well here. So to start off, we're going to address just the factual statistical pay of teachers. So I find three articles that I think are very helpful to illuminate this issue for us. So the first to kind of highlight the reason for the series is we have a teacher shortage in America. And as of last year, the National Education Association estimates that there's a shortage of nearly 300,000 teaching and support staff positions across the country. This is what's meant by when people say there's a teacher shortage. It means that there are 300,000 open jobs across the country that cannot be filled because they're not desirable, you don't have enough candidates, and no one wants to fulfill them. For whatever reason that may be, they may be unattractive, but most of the time it's because the pay is not equal to the job that they have to do. So to illuminate, what this pay is, I found some great statistics for this. So the average weekly wages of public school teachers, adjusted for inflation, have increased just $29 from 1996 to 2021. So the past 25 years, our average weekly wage, what I take home weekly, has gone up $29. That's stark in its own right. That is something that I think very few professions, if any, can relate to. And that it's been 25 years, and we've gone up basically $1 a year. Crazy. By 2021, teachers' average weekly wages were nearly 33% less than their college graduate colleagues. So I graduated college a few years back, and my friends who did it the same time period are making substantially more than I am that didn't go into the teaching profession, right? That went into maybe like an accounting profession or a medical profession of some sort, right? They still just had the same degree as I do, just in a different major, and they're being paid substantially less, or more, than I am. And we'll talk about maybe why that is or why people believe that, but that's just statistically inaccurate summary there. Now, the next one's going to be overwhelming. Don't be overwhelmed. It's a lot of data, but the only two columns we're going to focus on are these right two columns here. So this shows the percent change in just dollars that public school teachers brought home between 2000 and 2010, and then the second one's 2010 to 2021. So you saw in the decade of the 2000s, we actually increased our pay by 3.5%. That's still very bad, adjusted for inflation. We're still making less money, adjusted for inflation, but at least our dollar amount is going up. The troubling thing is the past decade, in that on average in America, teachers are making 3% less dollar amount, not adjusted for inflation. This is not adjusted for inflation. But in the past decade, we are bringing home 3% less just dollars than someone who started in 2010. So if I started last year and someone started a decade prior to that, they would be making more dollars than I would, despite obviously inflation always increasing, always rising. And especially in this past year or two, we've seen about a 7% inflation growth. That is very, very concerning for teachers, is that we're making 3% less, even though inflation makes that money worth less over time. You see some specifically bad states as in Arkansas, Florida, Indiana, Louisiana, Mississippi. You see a ton of negatives. Another big one is Wyoming. An outlier here is in a positive way is Washington. They're paying teachers a little over 23% more in dollars in this past decade, and their average salary is $79,000, which is incredible compared to a lot of other states, right? Obviously, their cost of living is going to be higher, but the fact that their growth is so high, I think is really what's important there, is that they've shown in a interest in increasing teacher salaries. Now, adjusted for inflation in the past decade, every year inflation goes up, right? The shocking in 2009, that it did not, but that's probably due to the recession. But almost every year, the value of our dollar, just a single dollar bill, decreases by a small amount. Now, this is concerning for teachers because if I'm I'm bringing home 3% less just dollars, every single year that pay doesn't increase to adjust for inflation, I'm making this percent less, right? I'm making this past year 4.7% less than I was last year, right? Hypothetically, if I were making the same amount this year as I was last year, that salary is 4.7% less valuable than it was, right? We are not keeping up with inflation at all for teachers, right? And that statistic from 1996 to today, this is contributing to that, right? The fact that the money, our dollar, has become less and less valuable over time, on top of the fact that we're making less, contributes to the fact that teaching is being paid very little. And every year, the teacher salaries actually depreciate instead of appreciate, which is normal for professions, right? You get bonuses, you get raises. For teachers, those are very, very minute. Every single year, mine is a 1.25% raise. And if inflation keeps up, like obviously the terrible inflation we've had this year it's going to increase that way for sure. So I'll be making substantially less this year than I was last year. Now, what I want to tackle today is the pay on top of the responsibilities, right? I think the pay, this data that I just showed you, most people are familiar with, right? If you've delved into, this took me 5 seconds to find these 3 websites, right? What I think that the unique perspective I offer is this second part, which is the expectations that we put on teachers to balance that with the little pay that we give them. So these are expectations that I'm going to tackle today. You can ignore these bottom half. We'll get to this in the next video. But the expectations we have for teachers. The first, I think, is what everyone expects of teachers, is to teach academic standards to all students with a very high success rate, right? That is troublesome in its own right, because my school, specifically, I sorted this phrase from my own school, is that they expect 80% of students should be above an 80%. So essentially, 80% of my students should have a B- or higher. Never going to reach that. That's impossible, unrealistic goal, and puts unnecessary pressure on teachers. But they also want us to balance, and people want us to balance this. Like, you have to excel. Like, your students have to excel. You have to find a way for them all to excel to a certain degree, right? But at the same time, you have to teach these very rigid academic standards that the state government has put on us in a fun, engaging, interactive classroom, right? We don't want you just to lecture every day, right? Yes, we know that we've assigned you 100 plus standards that you have to teach in about the same amount of days, but you need to do it in an engaging way. These are antithetical. They go against each other. They butt heads with one another. This is stupid, right? It's unrealistic. It's unfair for teachers that, hey, you have these 100 plus standards that you have to teach over the course of a year, but you need to do it in an engaging way. It's not feasible. It's not possible. It's not practical. If I'm going to have this fun, engaging, interactive classroom every day without any lectures, it's literally impossible to get the content to them. I teach U.S. history and law. In law, it's a free course that doesn't have standards to it. I can create the course myself. I can do this. I can accomplish the second one very easily, and I have done so. With U.S. history, where there are state standards set to that, I cannot. It's literally impossible for me to deliver all of the content, all of these important objectives, all of these important lessons that they want us to teach and do every single day in some engaging format. U.S. history is very lecture heavy. It's the reason I don't enjoy teaching it. It's because of these standards, right? Not because I don't necessarily enjoy the content of U.S. history. I hate the structure of the course. So that's already an issue itself, is that we expect teachers to allow all students or enable all students to succeed while tying them to these standards, but also wanting to have this engaging classroom. They don't go hand in hand. They just basically say, we want these things, good luck. second, which I think is the hardest thing for teachers to balance, is if I'm going to be a proper educator in my mind, I need to fulfill all these things. I have to be a counselor, I have to be a life coach, I have to be a mentor, a parent for some of my students, and then a teacher for all of them, right? Now, some of you may say that, oh, they have counselors at school or they have parents. Those are two assumptions you're making, right? Most schools do have at least one counselor, right? Some underfunded ones may have zero. But our school has 3,500 students, roughly, and 7 counselors. That is 500 students per counselor. That's impossible for them to manage, right? It's not teaching that there's a problem with, it's education. Our counselors cannot possibly get to know 500 students well enough to plan their schedules, to be their ear to vent to help them with any home lives and issues that they have there. It's impossible for them. So often, teachers and students rely on their teachers because they also just see them more, right? You only see your counselor during scheduling or when you explicitly go out your way to see them. Teachers you see every day because you're forced to, right? You go to their class. And so genuinely and naturally, students will know teachers better and get to know teachers better. And so they want to confide in us more. They feel more comfortable confiding in us because we just see them more often. Now, the parent role, it is an assumption that they have parents, but it's also something that I think is underappreciated, is that not all parents are good parents. It's a very harsh reality, I think, but I have students all the time that come and vent to me about problems at home that are, for me, really hard to hear. That they look towards me or some of their other teachers and educators as that parental figure, as that positive influence on them, because simply their parents are failing. They have high expectations for them. They're neglected, they're abusive, whatever it may be. Their parents are not fulfilling the role that a parent should. And so they unfortunately, they have to rely on other adults in their life to fill that. And oftentimes that is a teacher. That's a lot for any human to undertake. To be all these roles for one person or to all people. I have 150 students per day. But it's a role that we task with teachers, right? And I think this is a role that often teachers don't pick up because it is very hard to do, right? If my job is these two things, if that is what I'm being paid to do, right? That's what's expected of me by my admin and society and legislators. This is what I'm going to prioritize because there's a lot more pressure there to do these things. But if I'm going to do my job well, I need to do this one as well. And I think a lot of teachers struggle with the fact that they have to abandon one or the other and not be as good maybe on one or the other. And that really is an emotional toll, right? If I have a student that confides in me and I just like emotionally or physically or mentally don't have the capability to help them, it's a drain, right? It's emotionally exhausting every day. Now, moving on, other expectations we have for teachers is we want them, it sounds weird, we maybe don't want them, but naturally in the systems we create, we have them compete with each other. Now, my school preaches collaboration and cooperation, that you should work with your colleagues in the U.S. History department to create like the best U.S. History program that you guys can like learn from one another and take good things from each other's classrooms. In theory, love that. That's amazing. I would love a collaborative environment. But then they put a system into place that we use that forces us to compete with one another. That any test, quiz, quick check that we put onto that, statistics are populated for our students by each academic standard that's being tested. And then there's literally a button that says teacher comparison. You can click on that, and then you can see how your colleagues are doing, how their students are doing per standard in relation to every other one else in your department, including yourself. This does not promote a collaborative environment. It promotes a competitive one, in that admin and people outside of the teaching profession see the higher scores as better teachers. The other teachers don't. Most other teachers see that this is stupid and that this is just a waste of time, and that higher scores don't necessarily mean that that teacher's doing something right? However, the outside pressure of that forces us to kind of compete with one another, and it's really bad. And this also just adds on to this other point here, that we treat students as statistics and not as people. I frequently tell my students the exact opposite, that you are a person first, a student second. If I do not do a good job at helping you feel valued, helping you feel like you're a valuable person, unique individual coming to my classroom, I do not expect you to be a good student, right? But if my goal and what I tell them is my job every day is to make sure that you feel safe, you feel heard, you feel valued in this classroom. And then hopefully by doing so, you feel more inclined to be a good student. And it typically works. But what a lot of outside influence says is that no, these students, we want to see their data. We want to see that percentage in the gradebook. We want to see how they did on their test. Did they get mastery, near mastery? What do they do, right? And that's not conducive for a healthy environment for students or for teachers and educators as a whole. That students are very unique. They're very different. And to label them all as one thing or put them under one umbrella is very, I think, wrong. And it just shows a lack of understanding of humans as a whole. Now, to tie into that, we are also expected to conform to administration, the school board, parents, politicians, other people telling me how to do my job, right? And oftentimes people who don't have any experience in my job. So to give you an example that I think really, that someone gave to me that I think just really illustrates how abnormal this is you don't go if you're getting blood drawn or to get a shot, right? You don't tell the nurse, oh, no, that's not where you put the needle, right? Because you understand that they have been educated and properly trained to do their job well, right? Better than you do. They have more knowledge than you do in this instance. We do not give the same respect to educators. We all think in society that we know how to educate. We know how to teach kids and we know how to do it well, right? Administrators think they know this. School board members who are often just parents in the community think they know this. All parents think that they know how to properly educate their children. And politicians especially, which is the people I have the biggest gripe with, think that they know how to do my job, right? I am completely reliant on my state's legislator to determine how much I'm paid, what standards I have to be taught, what's expected in and outside the classroom of me, how often I get to teach. All these things are reliant on politicians who 99% of them have never stepped foot in a classroom as a teacher. They have only experienced education through the eyes of a student, and those are two very different lives. That they don't understand how to actually be a teacher. They understand what a student's life is like, and they kind of just reciprocate that and pass it down the line. We need to stop that wheel, and politicians are failing at that. But everyone thinks that they know how to educate. I understand to an extent that parents want to know what their students are being taught and what they're being exposed to, because especially at a very, very young age, like elementary age, I teach high schoolers, so I don't really deal with this aspect. That's a very vulnerable, explorative, changing time for young kids, and that we feel a lot more protective of those young ones, and I get that. But we also just have to take a step back, I think, and check ourselves, and that if you're going to send your kid to a public school, if you're going to do it, you need to trust the educators there, right? If you're going to do that, you need to trust the educators there. If not, you can homeschool them, right? If you really want to have full control of what your student is taught, homeschool them. That's an option, right, that you have. But if you send them to a public school, I think the beauty of a public school is they're getting trained professionals. Teachers are trained professionals. Though we are not treated as such, we are. And B, they're going to be exposed to people that do not think like them, do not look like them, do not have backgrounds like them. And that's a good thing. The reason I think that's important is because once you eventually have to let go of those reins, right? You let them go to college or to the workforce or to the military, they're going to see people like that, right? They're going to see a lot of different people and encounter a lot of different people that aren't them, that think a lot differently than them, have different political beliefs, different, social beliefs, different cultural beliefs than them. And it's better to get them trained and started on that early in a structured, controlled environment in school than to shelter them throughout their, youth, and to basically be like, you can't teach X, Y, or Z, but you can teach this to my kids. Because once you have to let go of that reins, those children will be ill-prepared to tackle the challenges in society, right? They're not going to be a good co-worker in their environments wherever they end up, because they've been kind of trained that they don't have to deal with those people. So if you're going to send your kid to a public school, understand that A, you need to let go of the reins a little bit, but B, that these are trained professionals they're going to, right? It's important to be exposed to those, different beliefs at all time. Now, this is a much smaller thing, and thing that I really personally don't really have to deal with, but I think a lot of educators do. There's this kind of pressure or expectation to always be on duty. If a student or a parent emails you outside of work hours, you are expected to respond in a certain time period and be pretty prompt in doing so. Especially if it's like the day before a test and a student emails me. That's when I really struggle with this, is that I generally tell my students, if you send me an email outside of 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., I'll respond to it the next morning or on Monday if it's over the weekend. But when it comes to like those tests in the day before and they ask me test questions, I struggle to not respond because I understand that grade's really important to them, and for a very valid reason. And so I usually, bend to my own rule then, because I can't help myself. But it's really unhealthy for us to not be able to define our work-life balance and to cut off work and be like, now it's personal time, home time. I'm going to stay here. But it is something that is, I think, it's just expected of teachers, and it's something that's really hard for us to do. And then to balance all of that on top of being paid 33% less than our peers is a lot of mental, emotional stress, right? This is a lot of things that we put on teachers that isn't just, hey, teach U.S. history, hey, teach law to my kids. There's a lot of external pressure put on us, and it's like I tend to say I love my job when I am in the classroom from 7:15 to 2:30. But when I am outside my classroom, when I deal with things that aren't related to me in my specific room, it's a tough job to enjoy. So I hope this was eye-opening in some way. It is a lot of things that I want to address in this first video. Again, the next two will be the next two in the series will be other problems that I see in education. But I think more importantly, in the second series, I'll go through some solutions to these problems, because I think addressing problems is very important, but it only gets us part of the way there. That it's not fully productive or constructive until we actually put solutions to those problems. So if you enjoyed this video, definitely like and subscribe if you want to see more. I would love to continue doing this for you guys. This is really fun for me to be able to talk about these things. Also cathartic in a way, to address the issues that I see and that I struggle with as well. And if you are a fellow educator, or you are someone that's interested in or has questions from this video or spawned from this question or this video, leave a comment. And if it's specifically like a big question that's hard to answer in just a reply to your comment, I'll include it in a future video for you. Because I think that this should be an open forum for people to be able to discuss and talk about matters that affect them. Because as hard as it may be, education affects all of us, right? And that the future generation needs to be prepared properly, and we need to get people in those positions that will prepare them properly. So again, like and subscribe if this was interesting to you. Hopefully I can keep doing this for you guys and kind of make this a side gig, but thank you guys for your help. I appreciate it.